Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Joe here with my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And if you notice anything wrong with the mic, it's because actually we're missing some wires. Anyways, let's get on with the Plantagenet. Most of this next chapter doesn't really deal with, well, it's just basically repetition. But if you get to the last 2 pages, suddenly it becomes, well, a little more important. Now, that said, just to go over some of the important details before. Henri is crowned king and does go through the provinces trying to, or the shires, I should say, and trying to restore order, and even brings along, right before he's crowned, Etienne. They do a bit of a royal procession together, just to hammer the point home. Then he's crowned, and then he goes and tries to deal with most of these robber barons. Henri de Blois, who is Etienne's brother, the Bishop of Winchester, decides, screw it, I'm running. He decides to flee rather than submit to his brother's successor, fearful that Henri in time will not really like him. So he flees and loses 6 castles this way. And of course, Henri then goes up to the Midlands, where there's the only magnate who decides, no, I'm not just submitting, I'm going to fight you. He's alone. Hugues Multimal, Le Seigneur, or Lord of Wigmore Castle. He, in the late spring, clings to 3 castles in the Midlands. Henri marches up an army against him, and Hugues decides, screw it, I'm surrendering. And while he doesn't exactly look all that dignified, he does, however, get to keep his lands after he makes formal submission to Henri. Actually, he got off kind of lucky, but he also, I think, kind of gambled correctly, guessing that he might win the king's respect more by actually being the only man to stand up in a country full of cowards. So I wonder if maybe this was not a foolish decision, but a calculated risk, where he got the measure of the man and then decided, okay, I'm going to keep defying, and then when he shows up, I'm actually going to submit. So it could be that this baron was a smart man, rather than a stubborn idiot. Henri is forced in 1156 to leave England to deal with a rebellion in Anjou led by his younger brother Geoffroy. And Geoffroy is of the opinion that his brother kind of infringed on his inheritance. And he's kind of not wrong. Henri was supposed to mostly get Normandy and England. But Henri claimed Anjou, Maine, and Touraine from Geoffroy, who's pretty much looking at this and going, you cut me out of the entire inheritance. And then Geoffroy would have wanted to marry Arianel so that he'd have something. He cut him out of the deal and married her himself, and pretty much says, what are you going to do about it? Basically, he's been cutting him out of all inheritance and leaving him destitute. So Geoffroy decides, screw it, I'm rebelling. Now, he had shown himself untrustworthy and disloyal in 1151 when he joined forces with Louis VII and Eustache, but you can kind of understand Geoffroy, I find, because it doesn't feel that great when you're left basically all but a pauper, when you should be at least a nobleman. But he has to basically go cap in hand begging either his brother or his brother's enemies for pity and mercy and money. Basically, for all intents and purposes, Henri basically said, oh, yeah, I'm now the king and the lord. Can you clear up your stuff? I'm your landlord too. Clear up. That'd be humiliating. And Henri made no effort to reconcile with him or to, compromise. He should have compromised, even just one castle. But he wasn't willing to. Now, I understand, Dan, you took the attitude that Geoffroy was being ambitious.
And maybe, and maybe it's how I perceived it, the way it was written. And it's not a your truth, my truth thing. It's more of a. It sounded like Geoffroy was being the unreasonable one. But details that you have mentioned is important to note why he would resort to.
And there's another thing. The only reason I'm coming down hard on Henri here is that the truth is, and remember, there's only one truth, the objective truth. Facts don't care about our feelings or opinions. Um, the fact of the matter is that Henri would have a hard time of compromise over the course of his career with his family. He kind of treated Geoffroy badly here. But remember, this is a precursor, a prelude to how he's going to treat his kids. His kids are basically going to be asking, okay, can we just have responsibilities, obligations, and duties, and basically just move out of mom's basement because we just want to work? Henri would keep them at home basically until their 30s or something and just humiliate them and be like, you're just a kid. What do you know? Well, at 14, Henri moved out of mom's house and was hardworking and whatnot. But then he treats his kids like they're basically babies, well into their 20s and 30s. And you can kind of understand their frustration and their anger at this poor treatment. And then basically they're tossed out to an extent, and they have to fend for themselves and fight and struggle to try to claim some measure of inheritance. On the other hand, they are incredibly unfilial towards him. They are treacherous. They are honestly not very pleasant men. None of Hamidou's sons were very good men. Geoffroy, I don't think was quite as bad as they were. I think there's reasonable, justified anger on his part. He wanted to be. He didn't want to be cut out. He wanted to be included to some extent. Now, interesting fun fact: when it would come time to distributing some measure of inheritance and whatnot to his sons, ironically, Jean, that is to say, Henri's son, the bad King John, would actually solve this problem to an extent. He'd have multiple sons and give the younger sons some minor territories and some minor titles that would, over in England, that would at least assuage their feelings. And most of them would kind of agree to follow Henri Cool, even though, or I should say, Henry III, even though Henry was a buffoon. So that ultimately, the difference between this Henri and Henry is that this guy is a true king in a way, like he's very kingly, but his grandson is a clown. So, but that said, the clown does have some good qualities to him. He's not like, say, um, Edward II or Richard II, who just have no appealing qualities whatsoever. But Geoffroy, ends up struggling. But bear in mind, in 1156, there's a conference called, and Geoffroy actually comes along peaceably, along with their younger brother, Guillaume. So the thing is, it's not just Geoffroy who has a problem, but Guillaume, the youngest. Basically, the two brothers basically come here and say, listen, you cut us out of our entirety of our inheritance. We'd like a slice of the pie. We're supposed to be your supporters. But here's the thing. Under feudal custom here, Henri has been a jerk, actually an a-hole, because it is his duty as the eldest brother to take care of his younger brothers. He is meant to be their patron, and they in turn are meant to be his most loyal right-hand men. But he's basically just thrown them out of the house and said, what do I need to give you anything?
Oh, in the meantime, he's compromising with Etienne's son and followers.
Yep. While refusing to compromise with his own brothers. Kind of paints a very hypocritical image.
It's no wonder Henry's brothers tend to go to
Louis.
Louis.
Hey, why? And Mathilde, of course, says, okay, listen, this entire situation can't go on forever. This will wreck the kingdom and the burgeoning semi empire. Okay, I have an idea. Let's compromise and negotiate some sort of peace deal. Now, the peacekeeping efforts come to nothing. After the conference, Geoffroy formally rebels again. But a year later, the people of Nantes and Lower Bretagne elect Geoffroy their new comte. This is a weird, like, Dan Jones says this is a stroke of luck. It's a little too convenient to be luck. I wonder if Mathilde's hands may be in this pie, where she might have discreetly leveled a bit of money, thrown a bit of money towards the mayor or something of that city, and he agreed to basically put Geoffroy's name before the people, and from there they said, yeah, okay. No, I would say that would be a combination of luck and manipulation. But I suspect her hand might have been involved in this. I don't think Henri did, but if his hand was involved, it's because Mummy told him, you're going to give your brother something. Stop just stealing from your brothers. And Henri had to say, fine. But we got to bear in mind, he was a very strong Mummy's boy, Henri. So I suspect it's his mother who said, listen, don't you steal from your brothers again. And he said, oh, fine, Mummy, basically. Now, if this makes it seem like he's weak, he's not. He was a very strong ruler. But he just didn't know how to compromise with family. He could compromise with others, just not family. And Dan Jones once said something very prescient. He said that arguably it's probably that Henri did not believe his sons, or in this case his brothers, could do the job he could do. And he's kind of right. He was a genius and an energetic ruler. But on the other hand, if he had compromised with his younger brothers, brought them into the fold sooner, given them good wives, married them off properly, given them good land, and patronized them, they would have been his most dedicated followers, and the Angevin family would have planted firmer roots in France, and this would have tied them closer to the vassals, and it would have made the Angevin subjects a little less able to rebel because the feudal lords would be tied via marriage to the brothers, and in this way there'd be these strong familial connections. But because he doesn't really do this, this puts his sons later in very awkward positions. The first one to start realizing, we actually do have to marry into France, into the locality, was ironically Jean. He perceived the problem, tried to deal with it, but it kind of blew up, no matter what. But I would argue it has its roots in Henri and Richard's handling, or mishandling, I should say, of the French territories. And this is not to say that it's entirely their fault. These French territories are very recalcitrant, violent, and prone to just the worst sort of violence one could imagine. Because, franchement, Aquitaine, Anjou, Normandy, Bretagne, these were very Celtic and Nordic regions of France, and they had all the violence of those races. So, yeah, not exactly Henri's fault on that one. It is, but it isn't. It's complicated. It's nuanced. That's why it's so much fun to study and discuss, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, he. But at the same time, like the only reason I have compassion for Geoffroy is I've been in hard times. You have. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know he's not exactly the most loyal brother, but having all but been on the streets at one point, it's like I can kind of sympathize. But on the other hand, um, ironically, we've never been cut out amongst us brothers because we generally know not to. But we've had uncles try to cut our dad out of parts of the inheritance and cut us out of his. So, as well as an aunt. But the thing is, this sort of family dynamic is not as uncommon as people think. And the thing is, I think the first step towards healing this sort of stuff is acknowledgement. Now, that said, Geoffroy is elected Comte de Comte de um, Bretagne. And Bretagne ends up it is a pretty large territory. It's a really good position, and it extends the Plantagenet family enterprise downstream along the Loire, and it brings into the fold some of the most violent, some of the most conservative, and some of the most Celtic elements into the kingdom. If they can keep and secure this territory, it could be the most dynamic territory, because this is arguably a territory that can fight harder and longer than Aquitaine and Normandy to an extent. So if they can hold it and keep it, that'll make Louis's job that much harder. And Louis doesn't help himself by being an incompetent buffoon. Ironically, I find it funny that Henry III is very similar to Louis VII. The two are both incompetent buffoons. Both of them are very pious. This is a good thing. But they lack that energetic drive. They trust the wrong men. They make the wrong decisions at the wrong times. They're spiteful. And they're just generally incompetent. So, there's that in common between the two. That said, Dan Jones comments on how Henry would have to work with a lot of unceasing effort. Because, now Geoffroy, real quick, was placated by this deal and really liked it. But then he died in 1158, a year later. Ouch.
How convenient.
To an extent, but it's also inconvenient for Henri. He just got us a major ally and scored a massive diplomatic and military coup. He conquered a territory without ever having to conquer it. Then the brother dies. I think this is more convenient for Louis. Although, had Geoffroy dug his roots in, I think it would have been harder to dislodge the Plantagenet. But it's convenient for France that, was dislodged. But, yeah, as it's commented here, Henri will have to work with all the energy of an Alexandre or Charlemagne. True. Now he lacked the overwhelming genius and majesty of Charlemagne, and lacked that energetic drive of sorts that Alexandre had. But he did have his own energetic drive. That's all his own. He had a lot more patience than Alexandre. He was a much better lawmaker than him, a much better statesman, and arguably a much better king than him. Oh, no doubt, Alexander the Great was a better general, probably. But let us be honest, he didn't much care about kingship. It didn't interest him. He was essentially a rich kid who was a trust fund baby, who inherited from his daddy the greatest army in the known world at the time. And he just wanted to use it. Whereas Henri had to fight for every inch of his inheritance, and then had to keep it, which took a lot of effort and energy. Now, he didn't have the genius and charisma of Augustus Caesar or Charlemagne, but he came close. And sometimes that's all you need to, but other times it's not enough. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out our other stuff, and check out our Substack if you're listening to this on YouTube. We do all manner of history stuff on Substack, and also do a lot of fiction content. Now, if you're listening to this on Substack, do please restack it, and I hope you'll consider, if you have the funds to spare, supporting this Substack, because if you want, for just $11 American, you get a full year's subscription, and thus access to all the later chapters of all of our fictional works. And we wish you the very best, my friends. So do take care.